themselves elsewhere in the museum or in the outside world. Our William Perfect exhibition told the story of a remarkable 18th century doctor, poet, and Freemason from Kent. By taking a very human angle, the exhibition aimed to engage our audiences with Freemasonry on an emotional as well as an intellectual level. We worked with UGLE and a storytelling expert to revitalise our guide boards. So these now bring the story of Freemasonry to life by interpreting our collections, and visitors learn about Freemasonry's values and they get to see a film about modern Freemasonry. We run events which aim to, they encourage visitors to learn about Freemasonry from different perspectives, in this case in a fun and quite informal setting. And the feedback we've had has been really positive. So our audience-focused approach means that our exhibitions, tours, events are more accessible and relevant than they used to be. Our second strategic aim is to raise awareness of the museum and attract people to visit. And again, we've been working to change visitors' perceptions. So in short, in 2018, we found that most people had never heard of the museum. And those who had assumed that it was only for Freemasons. They assumed the museum would be dry and old-fashioned and not really worth visiting. So this is where brand comes in. We used a brand framework to articulate the DNA of the museum, what makes us unique, what makes us the kind of organisation that people want to spend time with. How do we interact with our visitors? What impact will we have on them and for them? Now, brand isn't just about a logo, it's about how we speak to our visitors, it's about how we design our exhibitions and events to establish a distinctive identity that audiences can relate to. That said, you might have noticed that we did develop a new logo as part of a bold and modern visual identity system. And we rolled that out across all of our print communication. We built a new user-focused, mobile-friendly website with loads of new content and features. We created new social channels and an e-newsletter. We've delivered an awareness-raising campaign across, or several awareness-raising campaigns across traditional media and digital media. And we've been out and about promoting our research resources. As a result, in 2019, we attracted over 58,000 visitors. So that's 66% more than in 2017. We attracted more new researchers than in previous years. And we increased our digital audience by 50%. So this is the second way, really, that you can help us. I would recommend signing up to our newsletter so you can stay up to date with what we're doing. But if you can share our content on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, there's some brilliant stuff on there. I think you'll enjoy it. And the more you can help us to get the word out, the more people that we'll be able to introduce to Freemasonry and heritage. So in recent weeks, obviously, the importance of digital has come to light like never before. We're working on a long-term digital strategy right now for the museum. And at the same time, we're making more of our new website by putting more of our exhibition content online whilst we're temporarily closed to the public. So, for example, Phases was a collaboration with an artist collective called LUMEN. LUMEN created a new artwork for us in response to collection items that featured astronomical symbolism. So this offered a completely original perspective on Freemasonry and it reached out to a new, youthful, art-loving audience. If you missed the installation, you can now see it on our website. We're also sharing content from two new displays online. So Treasures showcases highlights from our library and archive collection. And Familiar Faces highlights the achievements of diverse Freemasons from around the world. This is Josephine Baker, entertainer, French resistance agent, civil rights activist, and Freemason. Meanwhile, we're working behind the scenes preparing our next major exhibition, Artworkers, Design That Inspired the Freemason, which will have both a physical and a digital presence. So again, this exhibition is intended to spark the curiosity of new audiences who might not ordinarily think they were interested in Freemasonry. And there will also be plenty of interest to Freemasons in there too. So what does all this mean for Freemasonry? I think it's important to be clear that as a charity, the museum naturally has its own purposes and goals. But what we can see is that in pursuing these, the museum delivers incidental benefits for Freemasonry as an organisation. So if you take awareness, we've dramatically increased the size of the physical and digital audience of the museum. But the impact is even greater than that. So our awareness campaign was estimated to reach around 1 million people last year. Now, they didn't all come to the museum straight away, but they did encounter posters and digital ads which represented Freemasonry in an intriguing light. Similarly, when it comes to public opinion, the press love covering exhibitions and the public love reading about them. So this means that the museum is indirectly a great source of news stories, good news stories about Freemasonry. These are some of the publications which cover Bejeweled with a reach of hundreds of thousands, and we're hoping that Artworkers will do even better. What about membership? Well, as a museum, we can't have recruitment as a direct objective, but by giving people an insight into Freemasonry, by challenging their preconceptions, by helping them to discover personal connections, we're provoking curiosity about Freemasonry. And for some, that will spark a deeper interest. At an individual level, Freemasons are one of our core audiences. So our exhibitions and our online content is designed to be relevant to you. So this is the third thing that you can do to support us, and perhaps it's the most obvious one. Check out the content on the website. Come and visit us as soon as we're open again. And if there's something that you'd like to see in the museum, let us know, just tell us. The museum is, as it always has been, an unparalleled resource for Freemasons who want to deepen their knowledge. And in its new and modernised incarnation, it also continues to be a huge source of pride. We're collecting material about contemporary Freemasonry, which in time will become the source material for histories and exhibitions of the future. So this is the last point that I'd like your help with. You are the new generation of Freemasons. What you're doing to keep Freemasonry's traditions and spirit alive will become part of the history of Freemasonry itself. So how are you making Freemasonry relevant to younger members? What are you producing, whether that's objects or print or digital material, that we as a museum should be collecting to document your contribution and your experiences? And here I'm not just talking about COVID-19. I'm asking, what does modern Freemasonry look like for you? And how can we as a museum preserve that for posterity? So those are some of my thoughts. I'm really interested to hear from you, and I've got a few questions for you to ponder. What value do you think the museum creates for Freemasonry? Are there opportunities that you'd like to see us making more of? Will you help us get the word out? And what are you producing that we should be collecting in our museum, library and archive relating to COVID-19 and to your wider experience as new and young Freemasons in the 21st century? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vicky. That was a brilliant presentation. We've got loads of questions for you as well, so I think you're going to be inundated with it. In the minute, we're just looking towards 9 o'clock for the time to toast. Can I also just apologise to Robert Vaughan as well? I forgot to say that he was on the call, and Robert is the chairman of the museum as well. So apologies for that, and welcome to the call. We're very glad to have you. What we're going to do is I'm going to pass you over to Mitch because we've got 1 minute until 9, and then we'll do the time to toast.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Vicky. Very insightful. We've got questions coming out here, there, and everywhere. So be prepared. And again, thank you to the chairman for joining us as well. It's great to have you along, and it was very insightful, the whole presentation. As per usual, brethren and distinguished guests, we are having our time to toast. I'm not sure if time to toast really is carrying on, but in the spirit of advertisement and a big thank you to everybody that turns up every week, we're going to take a screenshot. I'm going to get my trusty compadre, Alan Coleman, who also sponsors the Zoom meetings, for lending us his corporate account. Thank you, Alan. You're going to take the photos. So what we're going to do, I'm going to make a gallery view. All we need to do, if you look at my screen, we just need one of these and a smile, and then we'll take a few photos. Alan, can you see everybody's screen?
Yes, we're ready to go. I'll count you down.
Okay.
We'll do a couple of pictures. 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Obviously, there's quite a few screens, so we might have to do it several times. Ready?
No, just twice. You ready? And 3, 2, 1. There we go. All done, Mitch.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alan, again for sponsorship of today's chat. I know I always usually forget to thank you. Okay. Again, thank you to Vicky. Thank you, brethren, for joining us this evening. It's been fantastic. Thank you for your questions. We're still taking questions on the chat. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. But first, what I'll do is I'll say your name. If you could kindly unmute yourself, ask your question, and then mute yourself again, that'd be great. And I will spotlight you if I can find you. So lucky number 1, Jason Marfel from Prorsum Semper. You're up first.
Good evening, Vicky. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was excellent. My question is, how did your time as curator of the Science Museum Group actually help with what you're currently doing now?
Well, one of the challenges of being curator at the Science Museum is that I think a lot of people find science quite a daunting subject. So they think it's going to be difficult to understand, or they think it's maybe not for them. And actually, a lot of science is quite complicated, and it is quite difficult to explain to a lay audience. But I think I spent a lot of time in the exhibition department in the Science Museum, and they have a huge expertise basically in understanding audiences and understanding how to make quite complex or sometimes quite niche subjects engaging and relevant for a non-specialist audience. So I have been using a lot of that experience to inform how we do our public programs, so how we come up with ideas for exhibitions that are going to appeal to Freemasons, but also to people who aren't Freemasons, or how we're going to, you know, take something that's quite, you know, opaque, like some of the symbolism, and actually unpack that and help people to, you know, to be able to interpret it for themselves. So that, I mean, that's one thing that I brought with me from the Science Museum.
Cool, thank you very much indeed.
Super question. We're going to head over to Cambridgeshire Light Blues, and William Wilson, you're up next.
Hi, Dr. Carroll. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Really, really interesting discussion topic we've had this evening. I just had a question about sort of the documentation process, and in terms of getting the collection out there in the digital sense. How easy is it for you to make the collection digitally accessible in line with the documentation that you have and what you can and can't let the public know about? And do you have like a collection explorer or anything like that available?
That's a very timely question, because that's something which we are putting a lot of thought into at the moment. Partly because we were planning to create a digital strategy this year, and then partly because that's sort of risen up the priority levels, given that the museum is closed and people can't come and see the stuff. So at the moment, we have our collection catalogue is available online. So researchers, well, anybody, but particularly researchers, can search the catalogue online and they can find out what we've got. And that's a really useful starting point for anyone that's doing academic research. It's for somebody who's just interest, that's not so, because it doesn't, you know, it might give you a thumbnail picture, it might not, but it doesn't really interpret those objects, and it doesn't give you the context that you really need to enjoy them. So what we've been doing up until now is we have been we have that on the one side, and then we've been making quite highly curated content for the website. So in our blogs and in we have a stories section. So that's when our curators or archivists or our librarian put together themed stories or articles or like mini exhibitions, basically using hand-picked objects from the collection to help tell a story. So those really are accessible to people, and anyone should be able to enjoy those. Going forward, what we would like to see is more of that kind of content, and we'd like to see more of our museum collection and more of our research collection accessible online. And you know, that comes down to in the first instance, planning and prioritizing. So you know, if we've got 60,000 items in the library collection, and each one of those is a whole book, you know, well, we've got 3 kilometers of archival material. What we can't do is just sort of start at A and digitize everything, because we're never going to get sort of very far. So we need to be really selective and think about what's going to be most relevant to digitize and put online. But we are, we're giving that a lot of thought, and you will see over the coming months and years more digital content become available on the website.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Great. And again, another fantastic question. Right, we're going to head over to where we're going to go. Leicestershire and Rutland, and Richard Barnett.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Vicky. Great presentation. Thanks. Vicky, do you collaborate with the other Masonic museums that are up and down the country in the provinces to basically ensure that they have a similar tone and level of professionalism?
Yes, so we do collaborate with other Masonic museums and libraries around the country. Whilst we have our own tone as museum and Freemasonry, we wouldn't necessarily impose that on anybody else. But we do have obviously a benefit of a larger professional staff than any of those other museums. So we do support them with professional expertise. So some of the other Masonic museums have achieved or are working towards accreditation, which is the sort of standard for a professionally run museum. Doing that the first time is a really big job, and we have provided some advice and support to museums doing that. We've also, there's a group called the Masonic Libraries and Museums Group that meets twice a year, and we tend to offer training type sessions or workshops in those. So I think last time we did, our assistant archivist did a session on paleography, so how you decipher old handwriting, which was brilliant because I'd never done that before. Or we might offer sessions on collections care or documentation and things like that. So yes, we do work with other museums.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. A question from me. It's a bit of a two-parter, but you can almost answer it together. Is that you've got a very extensive range of items in the museum. What is the museum as a whole, would you say, was their most treasured piece, and what is you, Dr. Vicky Carroll, what is your most treasured piece in the museum?
So that's a really difficult question, because I think within any collection, whether it's a museum, library, or archive collection, different types of objects have different kinds of significance. So you might have some really flashy objects which are really valuable and really beautiful and stunning. You might have other objects that look quite humble but actually have a really interesting story behind them. So it's a bit of a cop-out. Like I'm not really answering your question. I mean, we have some kind of one-of-a-kind documents. So we've got the Articles of Union from when the United Grand Lodge formed in the archive. So those kinds of things are really really key to the history and the sort of foundations of the organisation. But we've also got things like we have a set of jewels that were made in a prisoner of war camp, in a Changi internee camp and they're kind of made out of a bit of, I think they're made out of an old bus or something that someone's cut them. People have cut them and fashioned them out of scrap metal, basically. And those, the kind of, they're just incredibly evocative because they show how important Freemasonry was to people who were, in really quite terribly difficult circumstances, but they were willing to take risks to continue their Freemasonry and to make the jewels the kind of material culture that they needed to do that. One of the objects that I've just seen recently, which is going to be in the Artworkers exhibition, but I popped it up earlier. I showed a picture. There was a sketch of Freemasons Hall, and that sketch was done by Ashley and Newman, who won the architectural competition to build Freemasons Hall. But what I didn't realise, it's in a book, and within that book, it was the book that was presented to the judging panel when they were judging the architectural competition. So there's about a dozen sketches of different Freemasons halls that were never built. So they're wildly different, So there's one that looks like a kind of Greek temple, and there's one that looks like a kind of Gothic cathedral, and then obviously there's this kind of Art Deco, masterpiece that won. But you can kind of see all the Freemasons halls that never were.
Which is interesting, and sorry, I'm going to add another quick question onto the back of this. I'm going back to 1717. You talk about the documents you have originating to around then. When you go to America and you see the Declaration of Independence under like 2 inches of bulletproof glass and this, that, and the other, and it's stored perfectly. Are there documents that we can't see as punters in the museum that are stored in the museum or in the back?
So in the archive, there's a kind of schedule of what can and can't be shared with the public within the archive. So particularly for data protection reasons. For example, more recent membership records aren't available, so they're only available after a certain period because they're sort of personal information. So there are some documents that aren't public, but the idea is that in time they will go into they will move into the domain.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very interesting. We're going to go to Cambridgeshire Light Blues Clubs and John West.
Hi Vicky, thank you first of all for a very interesting talk. It was really inspiring to see how you can turn around something that was perceived by the public as being very insular and making it more open, and that's a nice lesson for all of us coming forward. I also loved your use of an Art Deco tracing board that wasn't one of the John Harris ones. It made a real nice change to see something a bit different. But my question was, do you have any interactions with the women's Freemasonry groups, OWF and HFAF? And if so, what sort of thing? And how do you represent them as Freemasons as well?
Yes, we do have contact with the Women's Freemasons. So in terms of what Museum of Freemasonry represents, we represent all Freemasonry. So we represent global Freemasonry, and that includes Grand Lodges from all around the world, not just United Grand Lodge of England. And it includes Women's Freemasonry as well. So as an example of that, again, the artwork exhibition that we're working on at the moment, we've got a portrait of their first female Grandmaster. And we've also got a banner that she embroidered as well in that exhibition. And those are, I say the first female Grandmaster because the first, the OWF, the first master was actually a man, because originally it was a co-masons group, and then it became just all women. So yeah, so we've got items in our exhibition from that. And yeah, we have got other women's items on display actually in the museum, but it's really nice to be able to make a feature of that material.
Brilliant, fantastic. Over to Leicester and Rutland and the one and only Bob Ray. The most relaxed Mason in the whole group.
Thanks, Mitch. I think, to be honest, my question was mainly answered. It was in with the same question as yours, really. So in terms of if Dr. Carroll had a favourite piece, and also why that was their favourite piece.
I think I probably already covered that by sitting on the fence in terms of outright favourites, but just mentioning a few that I like.
We can't twist your arm to just confess which is your favourite. I like your style. I love your style. Okay, Matty Brown. You can choose one of your 3 questions for tonight.
Hi, Vicky. Sorry, you get to hear me again. The one question I was going to ask was, as we know, United Grand Lodge of England at the minute are really trying to find out what the perception of Freemasonry is within England and Wales, and how they can counteract any negative imagery Freemasonry. Do you think the way that you're advertising and the way that you're trying to find new ways in terms of spinning a positive influence on the museum in Freemasons Hall, do you think that's a really good tangible way of trying to change that perception of Freemasonry?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think what you find when you look at what the public think or what the public know about Freemasonry, particularly with younger audiences, often there's just a void of information. So actually younger people generally really don't know very much about Freemasonry at all. They say, oh, they will claim to know absolutely nothing about it. So by filling people in and by showing people what Freemasonry really is and what it has been over the last 3 centuries or so. I think that fills in some of those gaps which people might otherwise be tempted to fill in by using their imaginations, or you know, by just believing some of the more negative things that they might hear without really thinking about them. So yeah, absolutely changing people's perceptions and challenging people's preconceptions is something that we are really keen to do.
And I guess to some point that you, when they actually come and visit Freemasons Hall, you're the first guys that they go and visit is the museum.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I guess you guys, you're kind of at the forefront of it as well to some degree.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, at some level, when you come to Freemasons Hall, you can either really you can come to the museum, or you can do, well, you can't do a tour at the moment, but you know, normally you can do a tour, and actually it's our front of house staff, it's our tour guides who do those tours. So yeah, we're very much a public place.
Thank you.
Fantastic, great questions, Matty. Over to Paul Robinson, the dawn of devisers.
Hello, Vicky. Thank you for your time. It's been brilliant. Have you considered a large sort of trailer as a display item, maybe a HTV1 that could tour the country, various events, take the message out to the public?
So some kind of touring element could be great, and it is something we have thought about. I haven't thought about a trailer, but that would be one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be doing touring exhibitions that could go to the museum, whether that's Masonic museum or whether that's more general local history museum. So we're not doing that at the moment, but we have got an idea on the cards for touring one of the exhibitions that I mentioned earlier, so the Decoded exhibition. So that's various books of constitutions, their frontispieces. So yeah, touring I hope will be.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I do realise we're 5 minutes over time, but we'll just finish the questions, brethren, if you don't mind. So we'll go to Adrian Peters. You can ask any of your 2 questions. Well, one of your 2 questions about. I'll let you decide. Anytime tonight. Adrian, where are you? Are you still here? Okay, well, we'll move on. Right, okay, well, basically we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, brethren. I think there's so many questions that we could ask. We don't have the time. Dr. Vicky is unable to give us a scoop on what her favourite item is in the museum, which I think we were all hoping to find out. But it's absolutely been fantastic. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, brethren, for the Q&A, and I'll quickly hand back over to Matthew.
Again, I would like to personally say thank you for everyone for coming once again. The numbers just seem to be kind of rising as we go each meeting, and it's brilliant that you guys are all here every meeting, and it's what we want, and it's going really well at the minute, and it's so good to hear everyone. It's nice to see everyone and start seeing familiar faces. It's perfect. Again, thank you so much to Dr. Vicky Carroll and to Robert Vaughan for coming on board, and thank you so much for our guest club, Cambridgeshire Light Blue Club. It's brilliant having you guys here as well. If I could just really
could I just chip in with one thing? I saw a couple of suggestions coming up on the chat of things would you like to collect, badges, or if anyone does have, just a reiterate, if anyone does have any items you think we might be interested in collecting, then email me or email our general contact email, which you can get off our website, and let us know, and we'll talk.
Great, thank you. Well, I was just going to quickly, briefly say that Vicky touched on the subject that they're collecting a lot of COVID-19 resources at the minute in terms of what people were doing through this whole pandemic and how that people carried on to be engaged and, you know, just kept masonry within their life. So what we'll do is we'll send some contact information to your Light Blues clubs, to the secretaries. Anything you got going on in your provinces in terms of stuff you're doing within your lodges, within your provinces, your clubs, get it over to those guys. I've been speaking to Susan Snell, who's the archivist and the records manager for Freemasons Hall for the museum there. And we might try and put a timeline together with what we've been doing as well. So what we'll try and do is we'll get in contact with the committee members with your Light Blues and New England Masons Club, and we'll try and collate a load of information, screenshots, you know, with everyone on board, and we'll try and send that over to those guys as well. But everyone, thank you so much for coming. It's been, again, a great meeting. Information will be given to you guys fairly soon in terms of when our next meeting is. It's more than likely it's going to be in the next 2 weeks again. And we'll let you know about the next club, next guest club, and then the next guest speaker. But again, thank you so much, Vicky Carroll. Really appreciate it. It's been great having you here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.